I would sit at home, you know, play this song on the piano. My grandparents had a piano at home, so I would ask my grandfather to teach me to play this music, right? I would get sheets. I would go on goddamn, you know, before we had Google. I would Google shit up, right? Get the goddamn sheet for this song and bring it to my grandfather. You know, like have him teach me to play zanarkand by myself, right, on the piano, so I could play it as a kid. Good beginner, but yeah. I just damn it. Yeah, I got into that, you know. Start thinking about grandpa and he died and so on. But yeah, I would print out seats and I would sit and play this thing, and I had this friend and we would play this to zanarkand at school. I have thought about doing something like this for years, actually. Right? You know, obviously, I love video games. I worked in the game industry for many, many years. I worked on one, you know, Final Fantasy game, of course, right? You know, I love fantasy. Very honored to work on FF7 Remake, then the first version, and so forth, right? And it's my videos, right? I like doing reactions. I cry a lot, you know, especially to animes, but also other stuff, right? And I like doing, you know, anime opening reaction videos, right? Is my favorite part, right? Music combined with storytelling and a journey and so forth. I love that. And I have done a few, like, my favorite game openings. For example, Suikoden 2 videos, Wild Arms or Link Below, for that, of course. But I was thinking for a while, it'd be interesting doing like an emotional, you know, top 10s, right? Going over like sad music of Final Fantasy, Breath of Fire, whatever, Golden Sun, right? You get my point. We're gonna go over in his video then, Final Fantasy. Started with the course, most of them uematsu, and see how it goes. Now, in the video here, I have just searched for top 10 like Final Fantasy emotional, like sad tracks, and see what happens. I haven't done it before, so I don't know what's gonna be in it, because I don't want to get spoiled. Right? If you have a list, guys, I would love that, you know. I think I'll do like maybe a community pool or something, because I would love if you guys could, you know, construct the list for me. You know what I mean? I kind of want to have that, you know, the how I say it, the most just like surprising fact, you know. So I was thinking about how to do that, but some kind of system would be really cool, really awesome. If people could like make the list for me, right? Not tell me, you know, what's in the list, you know, like what are the 10 songs or 5 songs or whatever, right? And I have no idea. So for example, if I do, you know, like older role-playing games, then I probably have imagine, oh, it's better finder. But if it's like completely secret, like what are the games? But anyway, long intro, but again, I'm a very emotional guy, fantasy. So we start a video now then. It's top 10 of Saddest Final Fantasy emotional songs, and yeah, let's go. Here we go, number 10. It's FF8. With a Squell. Man, I'm gonna cry so much when I get into the deep stuff. Oh. I'm getting goosebumps immediately though. This is how sick it is, okay? This is how sick it is. There's something wrong with me. Yeah, it's like immediately my body's like goosebumps. Yeah, this is like some kind of sad torture now. Immediately my body's just like, oh. Oh. My favorite track is probably the Witch song, though, who made, or maybe the card game, you know, it's not sad, but yeah, the card game, that's a bit. Yeah, it's starting to get on me, but I would say it's. Let me see if we come to the end. I will do that short review then. I think we do like a short review per in between, right? I will say it, right. I would not have picked the Oath as in my top 10, but it is a sad song. When it comes to FF8, my favorite is The Edna, the witch team, Me got yourself, do. The one that starts when they start playing, and so on, right? And I think that we see what goes for this list here. So I want it to be, like an actual, genuine, like surprise for me, right? But I think that you also have an emotional and perhaps sadness, right? It can also be played from more of those like powerful songs, right? That not necessarily has to be sad in the game, but like a powerful, emotional, like that song. Otherwise, I also really love the world team in 8. That one is really great. Always love that one. Okay, number 9. Oh, it's the exact Death team. That is Dice. Yeah, Sky Blue Eyes. Yeah, so little spin-off then, of course, Crisis Core. Now this image is painful, man. Stop staring at me. You're not dead anymore. You're kind of revived in the remake. Yeah, like Jesus Christ, man. Honestly, this image is freaking painful. Oh god, when this part starts now. Oh, this pain, man. Think about the feather detail there. Sephiroth's feather there, yeah. When it starts, let's go back to that. That was a short version, but let's go back to that. But that starts, you know what I mean? This part, right? Yeah. Yeah, you're like, oh, there. The max goosebumps, the feel starts. But then, of course, Zack, classic, iconic character by now, basically, right? He is, of course, very much centered in most of the spin-offs. Him and Sephiroth, I guess, right? And I don't know. We do spoil in this video, I suppose, right? But I am very interested in seeing where it goes in, of course, Remake Part 3. And I, of course, imagine, I definitely imagine that he's gonna be alive, right? He's already alive in this, like, alternative timeline or pocket dimension or whatever he's going for. So it definitely feels like both Aerith and Zack, him, then they're gonna be alive together, and they're gonna be somehow, fine and happy ending in the end, right? Där, I guess. Okay, number 8. Okay, that was old school. Yes, Amado's art. Lena's team in FF5. So now we're more in this old. It's so much goosebump. Oh my god, what is this going to be goosebump in this whole video? Whew. Just the goosebumps. It's so well done. Portion here. This is very much his classic work. In the middle of okay, it's sad. So I have a little side story here from my career then. So I actually had the opportunity very early in my career, actually after I left Blizzard, to work with Amano then, of course, the artist of this painting here. It's obviously his work then, he's a classic, original fantasy artist, and I have his art, right? But anyway, when I left Blizzard, I started with another company. This game was never released, but not fully. But we actually worked on a mobile game with him. It's like I guess we call it a mobile card game. It's like over 10 years ago. But that was, I'm very starstruck, having, getting to meet someone like Amano there then to work with. He did the art design and the car design of this game, right, and so forth. But unfortunately, he wasn't so like involved in the actual development. The companies it was in America, of course, and in California. He kind of did, all the art in Japan and kind of visited like once, So he wasn't like there. It was kind of like he drew the art, from home in Japan, sent the files over. Yeah, it wasn't like he was, so much a part of the actual studio. He was more like a hired him. But of course, a lot of the promotional bit for that game was promoted. Like, we got a classic Final Fantasy artist doing this art and promo art and so on. But yeah, there was an interesting feel to it. That actually was the second game company I worked for in my life, actually, then full time, so after my graduation. Okay, 7. Ooh, FF6. The Awakening. So of course Terra there. This is, I feel, always a highlight of his art then. It's Amando's art, right? I thought the 6th he did the best art. Oof. Do. Oh. Do. No hits, man. No. Do. Oh, this man. This is just. Do. Oof. It's that bit there, hits you so hard. Yeah, come on. No. We'll go back there. So of course it starts with this, right? But this part is this part is just so good, yeah. I started to get really emotional there, a little tearing up. But that's the most good, really perfect kind of like. This to me feels like sort of classic Final Fantasy music, right? Where you have this theme going on, and then you have those like interjection, of like a higher pitched note, right? I feel it's a very classic thing how it does it. I think it's another song that I feel is comparable to this one, which might appear in the list, right? Is FF7's World Theme. That has a similar feel to it, You get the kind of ambient, then you get that bam, you get the dun, get the high notes, right? So I think it is very classic how they composed the first. I guess like when I guess even the first 9 games, even some the 10th game, but especially the first 7 games has this take on it more, right? Kind of classic FF era, and but it certainly is overall, right? Final Fantasy is that they have this classic, trilogies, right? 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9. They kind of have their own console each, and every time you set the console, the music changes, right? Because you also have, of course, different bits and so on, different how much sound file you can have, right? For example, I really do love FF7, of course, with still more fighting and the battle music, but otherwise, I always felt that some of the best songs, to some extent, are the SNES titles, when especially it comes to the battle soundtrack and some other more like town themes, so on, can be really good, right? When the composer is like forced to kind of make the more the SNES kind of the sound card and so on. I think it gave it a different feel to it, and also I think to some extent why during the same era, I think like Game Boy Advance games, or like mobile portable games then during the later eras kind of had to kind of retain a little more that feel to it. See it was more of that. Okay, number 6. Oh, another classic. Another 6 then. Yeah, Celes team. What you can't feel here though is this is very much Aerith. Yeah, later on, I have to say that. Yeah, you do feel it's like kind of the FF7 team comes in here later on, right? Put us great here. One thing with this song, though, I think is very clear, and I'm sure we're gonna get to those songs later, perhaps, right? Is that it does feel, though, that Celeste team is the inspiration, right, for a course of other teams in FF7, because there is a lot of similarities, especially how that track starts, right, with Opus teams coming later then. So it's a little bit like that. We will see now that Opus again didn't make it list here, with a lot of SNES titles. I would bet we have a little more like FF10, maybe now FF7. You know, I think probably going into more the PlayStation titles now. Probably the list isn't that old, but it's not gonna have like 16 or whatever. Ooh, 10. This one I definitely know. Do 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 do. Na 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 na. Oh, but this one is hits immediately. This is 10 might be one of the best those. It's a good soundtrack all the way through. Every goddamn is a hitter. Beside Island, Yuna's team, to zanarkand, you know, it hits. It has so many good emotional tracks. I was listening now also, you know, while I think it's a good song, a good soundtrack, honestly, and I'm with this guy, what is this list? No, but seriously, that's probably the weakest of the 10 though. You know what I mean? I said it right, and it's good in the beginning, but yeah, it is nothing compared to like to zanarkand, and like I said, I always find Yuna's team sad. Maybe it's wrong with Vivi, I don't know. But, you know, I think that most of the characters' teams are kind of sad in FF, yeah. But we only have 4 songs left, right? And I'll be very surprised if we have, like, Aerith's team is probably number 1, right? And so on. And I definitely want to hear, like, to zanarkand. So that might be the next song then, because it felt like that was, like, a fine one. But, you know, I think to zanarkand it's that is the song in FF10, like, by far. Easily, and then also the lyrics, Suikoden, the game lyrics too. But given that the person made the list, he has 10 in it. I would assume that to zanarkand is probably gonna come now then, like the next one, because that one is better. Let's see then, zanarkand. Oh, I knew I called it. I knew it's a bit to zanarkand now. Here we go. Time to cry, baby. I knew it. Oh, it's maximum goosebumps. My whole body is like. I would sit at home, you know, play this song on the piano. My grandparents had a piano at home, so I would ask my grandfather to teach me to play this music, right? I would get sheets. I would go and goddamn, you know, before we had Google, I would Google shit up, right? Get the goddamn sheet for this song and bring it to my grandfather. You know, like have him teach me to play zanarkand by myself, right, on the piano, like I played as a kid. Good beginner, but yeah. I was damn it. Yeah, I got into that, you know. Start thinking about grandpa and he died and so on. But yeah, I would print out seats and I would sit and play this thing, and I had this friend and we would play this to zanarkand at school and so on. Yeah, we would sit in the school, like, you know, musical plays, and we would play to zanarkand, and it was like super sad. And yeah, no, but I call it, man. It was zanarkand. This is the saddest song. But yeah, I used to sing as well then, but otherwise in the band and so on, I used to play the keyboard and the piano. I can play like guitar over there as well, but I've always been the piano guy, right? And it's a lot of reasons why, because I kind of grew up with, you know, Final Fantasy and all the stuff, right? And I felt as a, you know, more that composing field, right? The piano is like the ultimate instrument. The harmonica. No, but you know, I always felt that you want to be able to play, because you can play like every song by yourself. You can obviously play it on guitar or whatever, but you know what I mean? I think if you can play the piano, you can play kind of everything. And I would absolutely, and then my grandparents, they had their own piano at home then. And, you know, they would teach me to play the piano. As a child growing up, I played the piano a lot, right? And of course, then I would interject that, you know, with my own things. Okay, fine. Teach me how to play the piano, but I want to play Aerith theme, right? I want to play this thing, you know. So I would like print out the sheets. I would find them on the internet back in those days, where Google, right? And I would get the sheets out, and I would like, you know, so we would play these songs and so on, stuff like that, right? And so on. But it is very much like the emotional thing, or sort of the figure thing. I was thinking about it when I play, and also kind of why I like leverless, right? When I change to play leverless like this in, you know, fighting games, because it is like playing the piano, right? It is like playing the, you know, you have kind of like the keys, right? So it always felt very natural to me, because it feels like I'm playing an instrument more, right? Honestly, it feels very similar. But yeah, I will also remember that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, cool. Aerith theme. Okay, what's sad Aerith theme then? Do. What is sadder than Aerith theme? Like, do na 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 na. Ha ha ha. Hey. It does feel though, like if you call yourself a gamer, I mean, I'm a gatekeep, guys. If you call yourself a gamer, right, and you don't recognize this song, then you're a gamer, right? And I think it's fair to say that, because I don't think you have to play every game or whatnot, right, to be like a gamer, you know what I mean? But a gamer for me means that you play all kind of genres, you know what I mean? I don't think you're a gamer if you only play like one thing, like say League of Legends. You're a League player, right? But my point is that, I guess we're back again here. This is like the most iconic role-playing music of all time, and this Aerith theme is like, I would say this is the most famous, you know, this is the most famous like Japanese whatever soundtrack role-playing game, but overall probably the most famous. Maybe it's like Mario, right? The Mario soundtrack, the first Mario. Aerith's theme is by far, I think, the most recognized like theme, right, for role-playing games. So it does feel like, yeah, really strange if you don't know this one, but it all hits that feel right. Spoilers, she dies. No, but it's she's alive now, right, in the remake. No, but Aerith's team is always a heavy hitter. It's a very classic one. And like I said earlier, there is like no surprise, right, that you have Aerith's team in a top 10 like Saddest music. I obviously would have that too. I would have to zanarkand. We used to have that before, right? Like I said, I kinda expected it to be number 1 in this list, so a little earlier, and I'll be interested seeing now where they're gonna go in this list, like who they're gonna pick actually sad in this thing. But to be fair, maybe Aerith isn't the saddest song, like pure music wise, but you kind of have that feeling of a very iconic female, character in the game dying, right? Oh, spoilers, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I think her death, of course, Sephiroth is arguably, obviously, I think arguably the most famous death, right, of all time, in video games. Yeah, there are very few other death scenes that I would say is more recognizable than Aerith. Honestly, yeah, leave a comment below if you have another one. But I think it'll be a very hard sell convincing me that there is any other death scene that is as iconic as Aerith. Certainly other characters have died, but even before in Final Fantasy, you have almost in every game, like someone dies. Nobody, it's a lot of characters dies, right? But just having obviously the graphical effect, right, of having these, the first PlayStation had 3D graphics, it was CGI, right? So having that cutscene, of course, Sephiroth impaling Aerith, right, it's so incredibly iconic because, obviously I grew up, I'm in that age, right, where we bought the PlayStation. I grew up with Nintendo, right, and forward, right, so I was in that age group when I was like, young teens, I guess, kind of like that, right, or maybe a little younger, arguably, because me past the Japanese, but the point is that I wasn't that, young teen, like 12, whatever, 13, right, when this happened, I guess, in Europe, and we had never even seen anything like it, right, I don't want to sound like a really old man here, but I think it's also, I think it genuinely is hard. I do think it's genuinely hard for the youngsters, so to speak, but people born today, right, or, like last 20 years, to even fathom how incredible this scene was when Aerith died, right? So even if you had other characters dying before her, in, for example, other FF games, right, office games, it was the first time we really had like a very tragic cutscene, 3D, death scene, right? Well animated, movie quality. We have never seen anything like it before. You used to have this memory cards where you saved, your stuff, right? And I would save different, save locations, right, on my PlayStation memory card, so me and my friends could load them just to watch the cuts again. Because you couldn't actually, there was no YouTube, there was TikTok, so you couldn't watch the cutscenes. So I would load those memory files every now and then, so you could, and then I had like a memory card with different saves, so you could go and look at all the cutscenes of FF7, 8, and so on. It was such a fun, it was like just, FF7 was just this is why it's so cool today, so iconic, because it was so incredibly popular just from a graphics alone. And I wasn't even a graphic guy, I'm a gameplay guy, right? But at that stage, when we went from SNES, right, Nintendo and Genesis, to PlayStation 1, and then a few years into it, that was obviously also going to be the biggest leap, right, of truly going from this like 2D to CGI. Yeah, it was just so amazing. And then having the female like main character dying, right? Of course, she was like the biggest scene ever. Right? Everyone saw it. It was so big. Not just her death scene by itself, but FF7 was so big when the graphic came that I even I would invite like friends from school, right, whatever, right, but like basically friends that didn't like video games at the time, right. 97 or 98, I would invite them to my home, right, and I would just show them the cutscenes, right, of her dying, but all of the cutscenes, and it would be just like, oh my god, this is like, people would be like, yeah, I trust you guys, they'd be like, whoa, it's like a movie, yeah. The graphical jump was so incredibly big that it blew people's mind, like genuinely, people were like, this is impossible, how could this be a game? It was so incredibly different. And then of course again, having them in that kind of just generational graphical change, right, having her dying was just like, yeah, but that obviously that was one of the scenes everyone saw then, right, So it was like the most viral death of all time, right, for that year, and it is still, of course, then, memorized, and I just feel like so many people that aren't gamers also know about it, you know what I mean, and so forth. And then, of course, it's been, redone to death and revived now, whatever, but it was incredible. So, yeah, I have a hard time seeing any other characters that actually being more iconic in video games, because certainly you have other characters that are bigger than Aerith, in a general fame, right? Like Mario, obviously, like so I mean, but yeah, obviously he doesn't die. So from a death scene, Aerith is probably number one. I have a very hard time thinking of another death scene that I would say is bigger. I don't think it's anything remotely close to it. Not at all. But yeah, if you haven't already, comment below. But I absolutely will rate her as number one. And obviously then the song is, connected to that. Right? Yeah, we play the song and we all remember the iconic death scene. But yeah, number two then. Oh, Sweet Home, Endless Sorrow. I actually would say that my saddest in 9 is Melody of Life. The lyric one. I always felt really sad. Yeah, like the classic, the song plays when you beat the game. Yeah. But maybe that's why I cried too, because you remember beating the game, you start playing the game, and Garnet and Sedan stand there on that point. Oh. The cheating. You can't have my Vivi? I do kinda really wanna... Oh god, I wanna buy the Vivi card. I really want to buy the Vivi Magic. I don't even play Magic anymore, but I really want to buy the Vivi card. I really want to collect it. I want to have it. Of course, Vivi is my favorite character in FF9. Oh, of course he's. Yeah, what is existence? Yeah, I mean, obviously, Vivi is the best character. He's like the best F character of all time. But I felt like cheating. I cry. It felt like cheating when they showed Vivi. You're like, oh come on, this is it's not fair. It's not fair, man. You can't throw me that Vivi. We'll talk about it a bit. Obviously, I would love a remake. Yeah, and I mean, I like 8, but obviously 9 is much better. Okay, we have the 1 left. Of course, we go back a bit to Vivi there. I think everyone is looking forward to 9 getting a remake, right? I think that I don't want to address 8 too much now, but I always liked 8, I actually think I like 8 a lot more than other people do, to be honest. I actually like it a lot. But I think that 9 is like, a godlike magical game, So if I give 8 like an 8, or maybe a 9, depending on in a good day. No, but I think it's like 8, whatever. But you get my point. 8 is a good game, but 9 is just like 10 out of 10. Yeah, 9 is a better game, and I think 9 is just so magical. And obviously then, if you haven't played it, but yeah, Vivi, this character here, and obviously I also have 2 Vivi figures from One Piece. I actually have 2 Vivi figures, yeah, but they're not the Vivi. Vivi is the best character in Final Fantasy, or definitely 9. He's like the best little black mage guy you could ever have. He's like your best little friend, son character. He's an amazing character. I feel I don't want to spoil it for the Aerith I kept talking about, but I feel like I said, right, with Aerith, I really do feel that I can just open talking about her death scene, because it's so iconic, you know what I mean? But with Vivi, I actually don't think that as many people at all, even remotely close, knows the story of 9, right? It probably is even a tenth of people that had beaten 7 that had played 9. I would guess it's even much lower than that, honestly. I think that's probably a very fair I guess there. So, but Vivi is all about text here, it says here, about existence, right? Vivi is a character, I don't spoil too much here, but I'm just going to explain kind of the reasoning. Vivi is a character created for war, right? He's basically, it's like an android, if that's the best way to say it, like a machine, right? Black mages in FF9 are basically just like a construction, right? They're created to fight for the evil army, So they're kind of like compatible, maybe like Star Wars. There's like the Federation troops, there's like robots fighting, right? But then of course they have emotions, or do they have emotions? So Vivi's journey is this classic, well-written storyline, right? Where it's like a sentient robot, right? Is he actually alive or not? Does he actually have emotions, right? And then you see some older black mage, and some of them die, and it's like, do they actually have pain? And so it's like a really, really sad storyline, and it is one very classic scene, right? And I don't want to spoil or not, but it's a very classic scene when you're playing as Vivi and you're fighting this older black mage, right? And he's kind of like, don't do this thing because then we're both gonna die, right? And the older black guy is like, oh, I want alive anyway, so I don't care. And Vivi's like, I think you should do care, you know? So it's kind of like, you know, should you actually kamikaze me because then we both die? Or he's like, I'm just a machine. No, you're not. So that's the thing, right? That being said, though, the black mages are obviously based around magic, right? They're based around like a magical mist or whatever in the game. So I think it is fair to say that the whole is on like an AI or whatever. Vivi is kind of like an AI, right? You know, an AI with emotions, right? But I think it's fair to say that Vivi's having emotions is easier to accept than like, can I make an AI girlfriend with emotions? You know what I mean? Because Vivi is magically based machinery, right? So you can imagine that the magic itself has its own emotions or gives life or whatever, right? Like, what is life? Is magic creating life in this universe, right? So it's easier to conceptualize that, okay, they built this like little tiny people, you know, it's like black mage people, right, to fight for them in the war, but they use magic as energy source for them, right? And then the magic might by itself give them an actual life and sentient being. So I think the game actually makes a much better job than most of the games to actually give me a feeling that, well, you're kind of like machines, but they're based on like a magical golem thing, so I kind of accept that they actually might have emotions, because the magic is basically like, you know, dead people, ghosts or whatever, yeah, all this thing in between in the universe, so you kind of feel like, okay, actually, maybe that makes sense then, it comes to life, the magic itself, inside the machinery, where I think it's in other games, or in movies or whatever, right, where it's like very clearly, this is a machine, it's just code, then you kind of like, I don't know if that could get emotions, but I think from a technical standpoint, I do think an AI can have emotions, not in the current state of machinery that we have today, but, you know, what is emotions, right? This has been on the video one day, I suppose, but I had a long meeting yesterday with some very, 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 very paper. This guy written many papers, so this, like, I had a meeting the whole day yesterday with one of the world's experts on imitation learning and reinforced learning. A little into detail, but basically, you know, they're making AIs, right? Training AIs. I'm not talking about making some goddamn, you know, image of Marine. I'm talking about actual AIs, right? And long story short, my point is that it would be possible, a little theory, to have an AI to imitate human emotions on a neurotic, like neuron level, right? Not just on the actual behavior, but actually on like a, you know, the brain basically, right? And then eventually, if that goes high enough, wouldn't the AI have our emotions then? Because it would feel the same thing, right? It would have the same interactions or whatever. But again, it is a very high level question, because it's like it's imitated from human brains. But in theory, definitely it could have its own emotions. Or it's more like, what is conscious then? What is emotions then? Maybe the other way to look at it is that, what are human emotions? Human emotions are mostly just, in the end of the day, still neurons, electrodes moving in our brain, right? Giving us emotions. Like, for example, earlier I was crying, thinking of my grandfather dying, right? My grandma dying recently, or after him, then much more later. I'll tell you. That's a memory neuron in my brain, right? Triggering that. And I could have the exact same thing happening. But we're not that. This is not how we build the AI today, so don't get me wrong. That's not how we construct the AIs. It's not the same thing how machine learning neurons actually are in the brain. They are imitating them, so it's not the same thing at all. But in theory, you could build that instead with better technology, maybe, let's say, 50 years from now. And then it's like, why wouldn't the AI have emotions? Because the AI's memory is the same way, how instead of like memorizing data logs, right, files, it's going to have memories on like brain system like we have, potentially. If you want to build that, you can also question, why do you want to build that? That's another question. Why do you want to build that? But anyway, Vivi is awesome, and of course Vivi is real, right? Vivi exists. Long point saying that Vivi is a real boy, but it is a little bit that Pinocchio feel to it, yeah, that he's a real boy or not. Much worse than Vivi's team then, in this list. Oh, it's like Lucas team. No, Forever Ray, okay. But yeah, it's like, they kind of like, I will have to think about Lucas team. I would say this is an interesting last pick, definitely. I mean, it's like a sad song, but I think that even in its own game, I think it is Celes team. What's the chorus? Jag äter morsan now. Okay, the last one to review. Yeah, this was a miss for me. I'm just gonna be honest, guys. You know, I'm an honest reactor. I think that we already had Celes team right earlier. And I think that is the saddest team of FF6, I would say. Terra's team is also there. We had so I have to admit, I don't know, it's not my list. I don't agree. I don't think this team is as emotional, not to me at least, as those other two they already had, right? So a little bit surprised that this one is this person's favorite. But, you know, so of course, subjective, opinion-based. I think overall interesting. Of course, I'll give you a link below for this video if you want to look at their own reasoning and so on. I do think it is interesting. When you look at these kind of videos, it's a few years old, but, I mean, they could have had all the other games, like 13 or whatever as well, right? And 12 and so on. And 1 and 2, whatever, could have been in it. My point is that I'm also interested looking at someone else, like emotionalist, because you kind of can see their age, right, perhaps. You kind of can see their feelings on it, because this list here is very focused on FF6, right? So that obviously kind of like this creators, like, this is when they probably really into fantasy, right, was FF6, right? And that is a little bit 7, a little bit 10, a little bit 9, right? So they probably grew up with that, like, you know, 5, 6, especially 6, of course. And that's kind of like their circle, right? Like those years of, you know, like 5 to 10. It's kind of like that is the Final Fantasy, you know, era for them, right? Which actually I think is probably the most common, I guess, era of Final Fantasy. A lot of people kind of dropped after 10, right? You know, kind of you get into 12 and 13 and so on, and even less than 15, right? So I think that's not overly surprising, but I think it's very clear. You can look at it. Yeah, it's like a lot of 6 and 7 and so forth, right? Yeah. Definitely. That being said, still an emotional video to do. To zanarkand obviously broke me. Aerith also emotional. Vivi's team was great though. Yeah, it's a lot of 9 in this list. Yeah, but like I said, like, you know, 5, 6 to like 10 mostly in this game. Yeah, 8 was the first one, of course. So very much like that. But I do think that, like I said earlier, that mostly for me, some of the saddest soundtracks in fantasy are, you know, the character teams, right? So having done this video now, maybe the next video, I don't know, but in the future, I'm thinking of, I would like to do like a character team. No, but like a character team, right? So Aerith, we had Aerith 1, and it's the most iconic one, super sad. But also much earlier. But I do think that some other ones that are, of course, really great then is like Tifa's team, right? You know, that's a very good one. I always felt that both her and Aerith have like the best teams in 7. I mentioned earlier, but I'm a really big fan of Yuna's team. So let's just go and listen to both Tifa and Yuna's team. But like you see, also doing a video of just like, okay, let's do like all the teams, because that's the character teams, right? Other ones I like, Sarah's team I really like. That is of course though a massage. That's another composer than the classic composer for FF. Same person that composed like the Sega game, so they kind of changed there. In 13, it feels a lot more like playing the Saga franchise and romancing Saga. Saga Final Fantasy II especially, because he's the same guy that did those music. Hamasu, now, Masashi Hamasu. So he has composed. He's the main composer of 13, if I remember correctly. Not actually Nobuo Uematsu. I think he became it in 13, and it sounds a lot more like the Sega games because of the other Square Enix that he's worked on, and it's very, very clear if you played his games before. But yeah, Sarah's team, his work here, very good. He also, for that matter, did the ending of the anime To Your Eternity. I think he did both the endings, if I recall correctly now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that. And if you listen to those two and Sarah's team, I found them very similar. So you can kind of feel he's like, this is the guy, yeah. But anyway, I digress. I'm gonna go and listen to Tifa's team, and then we end with Yuna's team, which I think is also really sad. But yeah, they have a good list. Don't get me wrong, it's a good list. But that's probably the two ones, especially Yuna's team, where I felt that, I'm missing this one. Because the other 10 they had, not to say the other one, I think it's a pretty good one. But yeah, Yuna's team for me is way more emotional. Let's go to that one. Let's go to Tifa. Oh, this one is always emotional. Oh, this slow start. Of course, now we're gonna have more. Yeah, after this one's a bit more tempo on it. This is classic Nobuo, though. Yeah, it's like a long drag out thing, and then it's very classic his style though. And here, of course, do that. Yeah, here it goes. I mentioned earlier that yeah. Do 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 do. No, 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 no. Do 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 do. Massive response. No, 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 no. It's always, yeah. I probably like it actually more than Aerith's team, honestly. Yeah. Do 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 do. Go back to this bit here again when it starts. Yeah. Do do do. But like I said earlier, this is so classic. It's FF7. Most of the song are like this, yeah. And you can hear that in Celeste team that it starts doing this. He start adding this like pin, you know. It's no 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 no. You can see it in the 6th team how he's starting to incorporate this kind of style more and more. Yeah, like it's so clear. Do 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 do. But yeah, I might dare to say that I like Tifa's team more than Aerith's team. I think Aerith's team, of course, said earlier, is more iconic, right? It's like there is the Death Girl, right? But I think this one is better composed. Yeah, I think it's a better style of it. You should quickly compare it to the World team. Very similar, right? How does it? Yeah, he drags it out a bit, then he pitches up the sound a bit, right? I think it's all very similar, these songs, yeah. Yeah, I love the FF7 World Team. It's really good as well. I think also one of the most emotional. I think for a lot of ways, because you know when you leave the city, right? You play the first game in city, the part one. No, I mean the original game. So after like it's roughly like 6 hours, 6.5 hours, yeah, in the original city. And you finally get to the world stage, right? And you feel it's like a really impactful song. And it's that style, right? When he builds it up, it's like no. You really feel it's like the world opens up, right? And you feel like this is the future, yeah. So it is an incredible, impactful feeling the first time, and we kind of, I guess, joke about these days. It's like a trope now, right? You have this like 3-4 hours of dialogue or whatever, right, in your role-playing game, and then it's like opens up or whatever. But FF7 really had that feeling where you kind of had that, like it was like its own game, right? The first part, as it made later, then it was a pretty long part actually, right? And then you get all the characters and you escape, and I mean, but you get the first part. I mean, you get like red and so on, right? And you escape, and you just open up, and suddenly you're in this classic, you know, because. For me at least, I had played, you know, other, you know, obviously JRPGs before, like Wild Arms, for example. I played before 7 actually, yeah. First Wild Arms, so on. Right? So the whole world team conceptual thing wasn't new to me, right? But it took a longer time to get there, and it was impactful. You had the song, and you died that snake and so on. Yeah, it was an amazing feeling, and I really do miss how they made this, you know, world team back in the days. Right? I hate 16 in so many ways. No, but 16 is such a empty shell, right, of what Final Fantasy is supposed to be, right? It has no mini games or whatnot, but I think this kind of stuff to me doesn't make any sense. I want to have a world map, yeah. With the 10th game and 4, right, they stopped having the world map. At least in 13, they had like I know the columns are disputedly popular, but at least, you know, when you got to it 13 is like 7, but it's longer, right? It takes like 20 hours to get out of the first city. Yeah. 13 has a very, very long linear part, right? But when you leave that part, you get an actual really good, I think, experience too. I really love 13, right? Very good combat system. So the whole exploration part of 13, I think, is really, really good. But yes, you have to get there first, and I do agree with that it takes too long time to kind of get that calm, right? They could have had better pacing for it and up for sure. But that's good. 12 is not the world map, right? But it's a very cool interactive part. You go down in a basement and you come up in a cave somewhere on another planet. Yeah, 12 has that like Elden Ring feel to it. People like these days, right? With Dark Souls, where you kind everything feels connected, and so many dungeons and caves or whatever, and boss fights and are very open. You can go and fight a dragon immediately on level 5000, you level 100, yeah, and you can get up outside another continent. So it feels very interconnected. It's a very cool game, and actually, weather was a big part of 12. One of the first games to ever have real interactive weather, right? So you had one area that's like a desert, then it rains later, and then new enemies, and you can actually move over some part because it's like water, so you can swim over, or you can move on some rafts or whatever. And it actually had like the enemies changed. Like the enemies would evolve, like Frog Guy would be stronger because it's raining and so on. So 12 actually had, I mean, I love 12, and 12 has so many extra detailed part that people don't even talk about, honestly. I give those credits for. It also was one of the first games to have achievements. Vagrant Story was the same creator, Yasuo Matsuno, is like the first game ever to actually have like real achievements. And then 12 had it as well a lot, so those two games kind of established the achievement system. That is something that people don't give credit to Square Enix, but it actually is what they actually basically first created that, yeah. And it was kind of like, in Vagrant Story is like, you know, kill 500 dragons with a spear or so on. So it really was the achievement thing. And then in the 12th, it was stuff like, you know, defeat Sin Behemoth and this thing and so on. Yeah, so it had a lot of that mixture of 12th was more directly like bigger achievements, like doing super bosses and side stuff and so on. VAGRANT Story before it was some like that, but also very like the current achievement system of like throw a fireball 1,000 times and then you actually would get stuff too. So it would be like if you got an achievement, you got a little mechanics in the game as well. So you actually kind of want to do them. Yeah, they were connected to a little bit like a bonus stat as well. But yeah, a little side history. Lastly then, Yuna's team. Here we go then. The final song I will review and react to in this video then, guys. Hope you guys like the video. I honestly was surprised earlier. I mean, yeah, I think that the other video had a lot of FF10 stuff in it, yeah. It felt 9 and 10 focus, right? And 6 of course. But I felt like, man, where's Yuna's team? Because that to me is, after of course to zanarkand, this is my number 2 then, right? But I also like, you know, beside Idol and so on. But yeah, Yuna's team, let's go. Immediately, yeah. Oh. Hit what now? This. Oh, it's always the classic, man. Oh, goosebumps again. Yeah, this what now says So I used to play this piano too, of course. Yeah, of course I used to play Yuna's team as well on the piano, of course, as a kid. This part here. I can really feel it sitting playing this on the piano, you know, when I was in high school, you know, like. You can really see how I like playing the piano, right? Because you can play all the songs on the piano pretty easily. Not easily, but they feel they're feel made to play on the piano. Yeah, not this is like earlier FF songs are all like, you know, this is made for the piano. Other games have other instruments. I feel that they focus on this. This is the piano, but yeah, just. That's so good. That is so good, you know. I probably heard this song like 1,000 times before. Yeah, it is a little bit like I know exactly every like tone, every part of it, the tempo of it. Yeah, of course. No matter that I heard this song before in my life, Jesus Christ. I lost count. Thousands of times ago. But yeah, love this team, right? Yuna's team is fantastic. One soundtrack that I think about that was in the list either for that matter on FF8 is Fisherman's Horizon. That is my otherwise favorite on 8. That one is so good, yeah. Do. I heard it so many times, man. This is hard to do. I feel like I sit here for like 10 more hours. Obviously, you might see that it's darker up. The sun has started to go down. I started recording this video like 2 hours ago, and obviously the video will be shorter, editing, whatever. But yeah, I can sit here for a much longer time, right? Just go over all this stuff. It is there's so many amazing tracks here, from like. I mean, I like some of the 1 and 2 as well, though. But I guess I would say from 4 to like 13 or so. That's kind of like my favorites. A lot of games here, but I think after 13, I like I don't really care too much about 15 and 16. And to be fair, to some extent, it is because I don't like the games gameplay wise, right? There's something I did like a lot with 15, but I think it had, I think it was a very weak combo system, right? I've been over it for a few years. I did stream it on the channel, or actually on Twitch when I uploaded it to whatever, but it was just kind of a weird gameplay mechanic. I never like died in the game, and 16 has the same issue, right? So there's no. I've been over this for a long time now. But basically, both of those games are too easy, right? That's the biggest issue, right? And this obviously is not a video, but I said it before, I say it again. When it comes to those two games, unfortunately, it feels like Square missed the mark, right? And I was really happy, guys, with 7 Remake, the part 2. I did stream it here, of course, and whatever it is below, but I was very happy, honestly, with part 2. It gave me a lot of hope for SquareSoft, Square Enix, whatever. Yeah, it might be weird to say, but it gave me a lot of that feel like, this game got it, this game got it. I don't think it necessarily is that 7 Remake is the best game, whatever. I don't think that's it. But it just felt like 7 Part 1, and let me be very clear here, right? Final Fantasy Remake Part 1, I even worked on that game. I genuinely was on that game, and I still don't genuinely feel it's the best game. No, but I worked on that game, and I don't think it was a very good game, right? It didn't get it, right? It didn't get it, because there was no extra side content. There was no extra bosses. There was, you had the Tifa minigame, but what had Sugar Balls, there was all the extra stuff, right? Part 2, you just got it. Part 2 made me so happy because we have to understand, to having worked on Part 1, right, it felt like all my complaints, on Part 1 was fixed in Part 2, right? And 16 to me, again, I think is a massive mistake, right, for so many reasons, like all that stuff. And then when Part 2 was out, I was like, they finally got it, they finally got it. I feel like they finally back on track here. If 16 had a bunch of the Part 2 mechanics, right? For example, I don't know, Chocobo Racing, but whatever side stuff and so forth, I feel it would be a much better game, a complete game. So I felt like they finally got it, right? Maybe I have hopes for the company again. Obviously, I'm biased, right? But I felt that Part 2 just brought back everything I love with Squaresoft back in the days, right? And having wanted to work on that company my whole life, finally doing it, and then actually not even liking the game I worked on myself, is tragic in itself. But it was really weird, and I have to point it out, I guess, in part here, is that I worked on Part 1 before it was changed again, right? So I worked on Part 1 5 years before it was released, okay? And they basically scraped all of that, right? So I was on, the team before the team that made it, kind of, you know what I mean? Because they redid so much stuff that, who knows? But that also is an issue, of course, or a side note, but it's a famous issue, right? That FF7 was stuck in, development hell, right? And then, it took way longer than they planned and so on, and they redid so much stuff. So I think that also the reason why 7 Part 1 is so empty of the side stuff, and why it's arguably so short and so on, comparably. Because they just had a lot of issues with that game, right? From an actual coding base and so on, right? And then when Part 2 arrived, it's much easier making a sequel because you can build on your current engine and your current code and so on. So they could kind of deliver a lot more actual content on Part 2. And that being said, though, I do agree with some people. I said in my own stream on Part 2 as well that it's probably too much stuff. Yeah, it's rather have fewer mini games, and have better ones. But I did think that I think that 7 was Part 2 that had so many good mini games. So I don't mind anyway, because yes, I hated some of them were kind of bloated. I agree with that, but it was 20 of them were really good, And I think that the major ones, like Queen's Gambit, right? They actually were like card game and so forth. And the race was good as well. But especially the card game there was a really good minigame. The card game was fantastic. Yeah, the Yu-Gi-Oh enemies, the puzzle games, how to get Sephiroth cards and stuff. That is one of the best minigames I ever seen. The card game, and obviously Fantasy famously was the first game to have an 8 of course and card games right inside of it. So that felt very, very good, and that's one of the reasons I also liked it too, right? Because to be a true, for me, FF game, you need to have this good main story, the fights, right, the journey and so forth, the great music, of course, but you also need to have those mini games, right, to have that classic feeling of a game in a game and so forth, right? And that's why I don't like 16, right? Combat, I think, is just too easy. It doesn't do with turn-based, it's just too easy in real time. But Virtual is that 16, again, the lacks all the extra stuff, There's no card game and so forth, right? And I think that just doesn't feel like an FF game at all. Then 15 had a fishing in it, which I think that was great. I actually really enjoyed fishing in 15. That's a good minigame. But 15 still lacked a lot of other stuff. And I mean, both of them lack, NPCs, right? Cities. Yeah, like 13 as well, unfortunately. They lack that, right? 12 and backward, right? Like, I want to be able to visit a city, right? And talk to NPCs and walk around and see this cool world or whatever, right? 13 had that, but you couldn't return to them, which was a mistake then, of course. 13.2 fixed that, right? 13.2 is a very good game, and they also fixed a bunch of issues with the first game then. But, 15 is like an empty world, and it's like some Sydney's every has like track stations. It's a weird game in that sense. And 16, of course, is like you have your home base and everything else just feels empty and dead, right? Yeah, it didn't feel like an FF game whatsoever, right? And I want to have the JRPG experience. Whatever, I'm derailing the video now, but I just want to, I don't know, I want to explain why a little saddened by 16 then, but very hopeful when I played FF7 Remake 2 then, because I felt, again, that they kind of got all the issues that people had right with the first part and also F16. It felt like they kind of just fixed everything, and also I think the combat system in part 1 and part 2 was really great. I always said I think that FF7's first part, the combat was very excellent. I always defended that, my bias I suppose, but the problem with 7 part 1 was that it was no good challenges. So you had this really good system, but there was no, bosses, right? There was extra content. There were only 2 bosses in Shinra. Yeah, there was so few side quests and so few side bosses and no super bosses. So you had this like really good combat system, but you could actually fight anything with it except the main storyline, which is too easy, right? Too lacking. So in part 2 instead, we have all the side stuff in the Gilgamesh and so forth, right? That was like, okay, now it really works, yeah, because the actual combat system of F7 Remake, I think it's 10 out of 10. It's excellent. And yes, I'm biased, but I think it's fantastic. It's really, really good. Because the first part didn't have like the actual bosses, the actual like, the stuff to face with that system, which was very strange. As again, I complained about that, for many years before the game was released. Yeah, part 2 was really happy. Anyway, guys, what do you guys think? Please subscribe, hit the like button, right? I definitely feel like I want to do more of this, and hopefully we have 17 one day, right? Which hopefully is not like 16. It would be hilarious. Not because I want it to be turn-based, but it would be hilarious if 17 is just like tactical. That would be, no. 17 shouldn't be turn-based, like FF10. It should be like Fire Emblem. Yeah, it should be that kind of like you have 25 characters at the same time, and it's like different knights and so on. That would be hilarious. FF7 is that would be really funny if FF17 is like Suikoden Fire Emblem. They're like 108 playable characters, and they all are running around with horses and dragons and everything. That would be hilarious. Be like, oh, so you want to be turn-based? Yeah, we're gonna give you tactical, super inclined, permadeath, maddening. Oh my god, it would be so funny. It would be so funny. And yeah, and then Everon, we complain about it because it's too hard instead. Yeah, like super hardcore turn-based. Permadeath and everything, yeah. Random stat stuff is what we did here is. They're never gonna do it though. That's a problem with FF though. I love FF games, but they're obviously too afraid to make the game too hard, right? I think it's fair to say. Yeah, example. Okay, so last point here, but If you want to play old school, like Square Enix, right? Or SquareSoft then, rather perhaps, you should really play Remastered Sega. It was released last year, the remake 7, Remastered 7, put 2 then, remake 2. It's fantastic. And now we have the remaster of Frontier 2 coming now as well then, recently, but that remake is really, really good. That was the best game last year. I talked about it in my live stream, my Game of the Year live stream last year, end of the year. Yeah, so it's a good game. And thinking about it's the same company that did Trials of Mana, the Sacred 3 remake, which also was excellent. It's just one thing you could play multiplayer. But yeah, Remastered Sega 2 is even better. That remake is a Telltale game, and it really feels like an old, old SNES game, but with better graphics. That game was just amazing. It was amazing, boss. It's just hard to describe. But for me, like an old, SNES JRPG fan, right? That game was like the best game I played in in years, yeah. And also, of course, you have Neo Fantasia from same people did, NNobuo's FF's, the father of FF's side game, right? The mobile, that's just Switch or someone last year. Also a really good game. Actually, I thought about it, end of last year. I think the game has been underrated for a lot of people. That game feels like FF7 kind of, yeah. It's a very good game as well. Great characters, a little bit too much FF7 though. Like Kina is obviously Aerith and so on, but it's also a very good game, and also a pretty good new take on the combat system. It's turn-based, but you shoot stuff in like angles and so on. But yeah, this video is a bit too long, I guess. Anyways, you guys have a great day.